Hey, thanks for making Dolphins Today a part of your day. Welcome into this edition. I'm your host, Jake Riepma. And on today's show, we're going to discuss the latest ESPN Mock Draft because there's some intriguing options for the Miami Dolphins, both in the first round and the second round. We'll break that down. So both your first round and second round prospects. And based on what the Miami Dolphins and really Chris Greer and that front office, what they want to do in free agency, I believe will dictate what they do in the draft. And part of that free agency conversation certainly centers around Christian Wilkins, so we will discuss that as well. But before we go any further, hey, who's ready for the NFL draft? Let me know by liking today's video. It doesn't cost you anything. It takes 2 seconds, and it reminds me who's the real ones out there and who are ready for the NFL draft. So like this video, and let's get into diagnosing where the Miami Dolphins might need a little bit of help. And I've identified several different areas, and the offensive line is certainly among them. Now, this was an offensive line that was banged up all season. They had 12 different starting combinations, really because of the injuries. It was like musical chairs, bringing new guys in and changing different positions because of the injury bug. So adding some depth to the offensive line would certainly be a value add. And all that said, at times this offensive line gelled well together, but there were some other components where they really struggled, such as ranking 31st in pass block win rate. So when you look at the draft capital that this Miami Dolphins team, offensive line would certainly be a position group that they could address with that number 21 overall pick in the first round. They pick again in the second round at 55 overall. Omit the third round pick and the fourth round pick. That was involved in the Bradley Chubb trade in that fourth round pick. Third round pick obviously forfeited because of tampering issues. Back on the board in round 5, 6, and 7 for a total of 6 picks in 2024 unless anything changes. Now, in addition to the offensive line, I believe the Dolphins could boost up the linebacker room as well as the edge rusher room as well. Obviously, the injuries with Bradley Chubb, Jalen Phillips, and Andrew Van Ginkel, plus with Andrew Van Ginkel being a free agent, that edge room needs to be addressed. And same with Jerome Baker as a free agent at the inside linebacker position. Add in the wide receiver room. We talked about that a couple episodes ago where the majority / over 60% of the receiving damage this season was done by Tyreek Hill and or Jalen Waddle, so adding some depth would be nice there. In addition to the defensive line, as well as the secondary and specifically the cornerbacks. So, as you start to factor all that in, and I know it's a lot to break down, but that's what we're here for. When you consider what ESPN and some of the talking heads and the experts see the Dolphins doing, the latest mock draft has the Miami Dolphins addressing the defensive line position with their first-round pick, number 21 overall, and selecting Jer'Zhan Newton. Now, every highlight I've watched and talked to some Illinois fans, he goes by Johnny Newton. All right, we'll just make that easy for everybody. Johnny Newton, a dynamic defensive lineman, and the reigning Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year. So obviously, he's a guy that is a first-round talent. And when you look at his 2023 statistics, 7.5 sacks. He did have a forced fumble. Very impressive there. And with Johnny Newton, again, this is an Illinois team. At times, probably, if you ask their fan base, which I did, they underachieved as a team. But Johnny Newton, I talked to one Illinois fan who said he's the only bright spot from this season, and he had a whale of a season. So you look at what Johnny Newton was able to do, that 7.5 sacks and 52 tackles overall really is what jumps out to me. And you watch a lot of his highlights, and he really is that athletic defensive lineman that in a lot of ways reminds me of Christian Wilkins. So that becomes the conversation. And on one school of thought, you think, let's go get a young guy like Johnny Newton, Big Ten reigning Defensive Player of the Year. And on the other side of the equation, it's do we want to re-sign Christian Wilkins? So put your hypothetical hat on for me and say this is, in fact, what the Dolphins decide to do. They're going to go draft their replacement, their Christian Wilkins replacement, and pick up Johnny Newton out of Illinois. Let me know what you think of that pick. Grade it for me down in the comments. A, B, C, D, or F. And if you got some bonus points, let me know why you gave it that grade. But the latest ESPN mock draft has the Miami Dolphins selecting Johnny Newton, the dynamic defensive lineman, reigning Big Ten Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year out of Illinois. Now, I think this pick makes a lot of sense. Potentially, again, it becomes that conversation. You want to re-sign a known commodity like Christian Wilkins, who is coming off a career year in a lot of ways. He had the 9.5 sacks, which was a career high. You watched Hard Knocks. You saw how he was a vocal leader of the defense. He has that chemistry and that dynamic playmaking ability with Zach Sieler, who you just inked up long-term as well. So you think about the salt and pepper combination of Zach Sieler and Christian Wilkins in the interior defensive line. That was an area of strength for this Miami Dolphins team. The two of them helped the Dolphins combine for a ton of sacks this season. In fact, the Dolphins were third most sacks in the NFL, or had the third most sacks in the NFL. So obviously there's some proof in the pudding there. But again, as a defensive tackle in a contract year, Christian Wilkins broke out. And because of that, he had that breakout year. He's probably going to demand quite a high salary. And we know where the Dolphins are in terms of salary deficit, projected to be about 40 to 50 million in the hole. So some difficult decisions will have to be made. Now, coming up, we will break it down even more. Christian Wilkins or Jer'Zhan Newton out of Illinois. But right now, I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to today's presenting sponsor, Game Time, far and away the best way to purchase your tickets. And in fact, it's the only ticketing app you need. Last-minute ticket deals, lowest price guaranteed. I'm telling you guys, I've been telling you about Game Time for months at a time, and you know that as a new user, you get $20 off when you use that promo code FINSCHAT. We'll put that in the comments. But I got a new deal for you as well. The big game's coming up in Vegas, and we're offering $100 off if you redeem using that code Vegas100. Now, I know what you're going to say, Riepma, it's $100. Well, listen, I know tickets are expensive, but $100 is still $100. Think about what you could do in Vegas with $100. Maybe a couple more rounds at wherever you're having drinks, wherever you're eating, or probably even more fitting would a couple more hands at the blackjack table. You know what I'm talking about. Maybe you put that 100 on roulette and you put it on red and you come back with $200. Now, I'll stop there. You get the idea. $100 is still $100, even though prices for the big game are certainly expensive. But hey, we care about you here, and we want to give a huge shout out to Game Time, today's presenting sponsor, with that $100 ticket to, or $100 off your ticket to new and existing users. And oh, by the way, now that we're into the NBA season, that's right, you got to check out the Miami Heat as well. But wherever you decide to use the Game Time app, whether it be concerts or any type of live event, you can rest assured you're getting the lowest price guaranteed, even last-minute tickets, which is super nice, especially for me. I'm a procrastinator, but I know I have the peace of mind with Game Time. It takes the stress out of buying tickets. So download the Game Time app. Use that promo code FINSCHAT for a new user to get $20 off your first purchase. New and existing users, use that promo code VEGAS100 for $100 off a ticket to the big game. And we'll put that link and description in the comments of today's video. So one click and you're there. Take the stress out of buying tickets. Download the Game Time app. Terms to apply. Download the Game Time app. You'll be glad you did. Today's presenting sponsor. Now, do you want to re-sign Christian Wilkins or draft a defensive tackle? The Dolphins have the same question with a couple of different positions, because obviously we know there's some free agents pending on the offensive line, some free agents pending on the defensive line. The list goes on. And when you look at Christian Wilkins, who we're discussing today, you got to really make the case that he did everything he could to prove his value on that final year of his rookie deal. Again, he was an impactful player, played in all 17 games, which the durability of this Miami Dolphins team was obviously a hindrance. So the fact that he was a regular starter in all 17 games speaks volumes of his availability, of his durability. And again, you look at the statistical standpoint, 65 tackles, a career-high 9 sacks, 32 hurries. He was a part of that defensive line that consistently got pressure on the opposing quarterback. Now, other ways to break it down, let's look at the Pro Football Focus numbers. And you guys, I'll say this every time about Pro Football Focus. It's just one more benchmark, one more barometer to evaluate players at. And Christian Wilkins didn't necessarily grade out exceptionally well. In fact, overall, the 29th best interior defensive lineman, and consistent as far as the defensive pass rush at 70 and the run defense at 69.5. So pretty even there. But just overall, according to Pro Football Focus, there's 28 interior defensive linemen better than Christian Wilkins. Now, if you look at what he might demand on the open market, here are some contracts from elite defensive tackles, including Javon Hargrave, who signed a 4-year, $81 million contract with the Niners. And Quinnen Williams has that, I believe, is one of the higher paid ones at 4 years for $96 million. And I don't think Christian Wilkins might necessarily demand that type of contract, but certainly when you consider where the Dolphins are as far as the cap deficit, he's the type of player that if they do choose to invest in him, it will certainly bode towards having to put that investment into a guy that played all 17 games and had a career high. So when you consider all that, I ask you, pick a defensive tackle. Do you want Johnny Newton, fresh out of the draft, fresh out of college, the reigning Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year, or do you want to stick with Christian Wilkins? Because I believe it will be one or the other. Let me know down in the comments. If it's Christian Wilkins, type CW. If it's Johnny Newton, type JN. This might surprise some of you, especially my opinion in the value of the draft and the value of building through the draft. But in this case, I like the idea of signing Christian Wilkins and investing in the Dolphins' offensive line through the draft because I believe it's a deeper offensive line draft in 2024 than it has been in years past. There's a lot of first-round talent at the offensive line position, and I believe at 21, you're getting a day-one starter on the offensive line depending on who you take. Jackson Powers-Johnson, another guy that we've talked about. Jordan Morgan out of Arizona. The list goes on about offensive line talent that is believed to be there late in the first round where the Dolphins will have an opportunity to pick them. Now, second round in the latest ESPN Mock Draft. Speaking of offensive linemen, the Dolphins are projected to pick a second-round pick of Cooper Beebe, the athletic guard out of Kansas State. And you watch his highlights, which I had the pleasure of watching those this morning. And, wow, that guy can move. He can run block with the best of them. He only allowed 3 sacks in 2020. But he's a guy that loves football as well. And I think that's important when you think about who you want to draft. A former walk-on. So to go from walk-on now to projected second-round pick, that certainly speaks to his work ethic as well. But Cooper Beebe, a guy to keep an eye on out of Kansas State. Athletic. He's a great run blocker. Could improve on the pass part. But another part that I've liked, and if you watch Dolphins Today, you know this, the versatility. A guy that can play center or guard. And so you have those options when you look at the Dolphins depth chart because you need those options based on the injuries that this Dolphins offensive line underwent all season long. Obviously, Connor Williams, Robert Hunt, both those guys, Teron Armstead in and out. And so the point being, this offensive line could benefit from adding an athletic, versatile guy, whether that be in the first round or in the second round, because, again, this Dolphins offensive line was banged up all season long. And Connor Williams might not be back. That's an important part to remember as well. If he becomes a cap casualty, then you're certainly looking to draft his replacement at center or at guard based on how the cookie will crumble this offseason and some really tough decisions that Chris Greer in the front office will have to make. But overall, if you take nothing else from this video, take this. I believe that the 2024 draft class is talented on the offensive line side. It's a very deep draft there, and so I hope the Dolphins choose to build the offensive line through the draft. Let me know down in the comments what you think. Type Y for yes and for no. Should the Dolphins build the O-line through the draft? I've told you my stance. I want to hear from you. Let me know down in the comments. And if you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe to our channel because we do this every single day. That's right. Check the history. We got Dolphins videos every single day for you. Daily Dolphins content, live shows, and, of course, covering the Dolphins from every single angle through free agency, leading up to the draft and beyond. We want you to be a part of it. So thanks for those who have subscribed, and let's continue to grow so we can reach our off-season goal of 60,000 subscribers. Now, if you made it to the end of the video, last assignment I have for you, then I'll sign off, I promise. But make sure you like the video. We got to set a new like record on Dolphins Today. Can we get to 500? Let me know by liking the video. We certainly appreciate it. And as always, how about a huge shout out to today's producer, Cullen Brown, all over the ones and twos. Couldn't do it without him. Much appreciated helping us bring you Dolphins Today. And as always, have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, nighttime, and we'll see you next time on Dolphins Today.